Hi, and welcome back to our next session. And of course, a big hello to all of you dialing in from our many watch parties all across the world. And if you're dialing in from home via the application, make sure that you do not miss a single second. The agenda continues with much more thought leadership and insight. And now we're going to explore exactly how we can build and maintain a stable blockchain. Blockchain is far more than simply ones and zeros. As we look underneath the lid, we can see that it is truly a global ecosystem requiring diverse minds and expertises from across an incredible variety of disciplines. We'll delve into how social sciences, physics, finance, law, and many more make the difference between hash chains and blockchains. We have got some leading lights and voices to help move this conversation forward. So here to chair the panel, please join me in welcoming the Associate Head of Infrastructure at Cardano Foundation, Alexander Moser.
Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Hash chains, append-only databases, decentralized computing. All fancy sounding words, but none of these concepts are actually inherently new. And yet, blockchain is being praised as this new, fantastic innovation. And ironically, blockchain is often diminished to these old concepts, but is often misunderstood. And what makes hash chains and append-only databases different from blockchains is that blockchains require extensive parts of social sciences, physics, law, regulation, finance, macro and micro, and so on. I'm proud today to introduce you to my 4 panelists who are all experts in their respective areas and make blockchains what they are. I'm going to start with Nico Akeros. Being close to tech for pretty much all his life, he started coding when he was 13 and studied industrial and electronic engineering and founded multiple companies, actually more than I could research. And nowadays, he is focused on DC Spark. Sam Leathers barely needs introduction in this room. He achieved legendary status within the Cardano ecosystem, driving DevOps at input-output since 2018. He supported the very first SPOs at the dawn of Shelley. Nowadays, Sam is leading the Cardano core tech team as head of product. And most recently, he also became the governor of Barataria, testing the governance features of SIP 1694. Nick Cooper, to your very right, is originally from the investment management industry, where he audited hedge funds at KPMG. He structured new funds at BNY Mellon, and in 2017, he took his expertise from the finance industry to the crypto industry, where he helped set up the very first regulated Swiss fund under the Swiss regulator FINMA. Since then, he led the finances of Definity, Stacks, and most recently Mina from his company Firstfield. Dom Sheena has quite a history with Cardano, as he used to live in a shared flat with Charles and also Vitalik back in the day. And these 3 legends then went on to do their own thing. Dom founded IOTA and is the chairman of the IOTA Foundation. And since then, founded also so many companies that I could hardly research them all. And now I stop talking. Thank you very much for being here today. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. And let's dive right in. Nico, DC Spark's tagline is a crypto ecosystem building lab. Can you define what that means for you?
Hi, everyone. That's a fair question, and we get this asked very often. So what actually this Spark does, and why is this like actually an issue? And I'm going to start like a little bit theoretical, but I'm going to jump to examples right away. So usually when you have a crypto ecosystem, you think of like, first, we need, obviously, the protocol. And for example, for the case of Cardano, we have Ouroboros, we have the full node. And then the next thing that you think is like, oh, now that we have the protocol, we need dApps. But there is a gap between the protocol and the dApps. And these are libraries and other infrastructure that, although it's not core at the protocol level, it's still core because it's necessary for dApps. So for example, something that we work with Seba, who is one of my co-founders in DC Spark, is for the Cardano serialization library. Some of you may know when Cardano launched, there was only the library in Haskell. And for some integrations, like for example, the integration from Coinbase, this wasn't like a good fit for them. They needed something different. And that's when we work in, for example, Cardano serialization library that allowed not only for like, for example, the integration through Rosetta with Coinbase, but also for like dApp implementation using web, because web wasn't compatible with Haskell. There's like multiple examples like this where you like need this like in-between development to be able to build the dApps. And usually when you think of ecosystems, there's like multiple ways to categorize like the type of dApps that you want to have in an ecosystem like Cardano. The way that I like to think about this is through 4 categories. So we have first DeFi, as you may know, decentralized finance. We have DEXs, money markets, etc. Also, we have NFTs, then we have DAOs, and we have gaming. But to be able to develop things on those categories, sometimes you even need like different infrastructure for those. So actually, the work that we have in this part to do is like quite big because the gap could be quite big. For example, another example is that for gaming, we are focusing in what is like on-chain gaming, which basically means what is the difference with like normal gaming and on-chain gaming is that usually like the gaming that you will see in blockchain, it will be more of like Web 2.5 rather than Web 3 because like all the games will be in centralized servers, trusting like a normal game development with their servers. The only thing that will be like decentralized, it will be like the NFTs, but the game is still centralized. So that's Web 2.5 gaming. And Web 3 means that actually the entire game can be built on-chain. So the logic of the game, the state, and everything that happens is on-chain. So anyone can recreate the entire state of the game by just looking on-chain. And we believe that the future is going in this direction because it's more decentralized. But again, we have the issue for like a game developer, like, okay, cool, I want to create an on-chain game, but how do I do that? Like, I specialize in games, I can understand the concepts like UTXO and something like that, but do I need to rebuild everything from scratch? And that's where, like in this Spark and some of our other organizations like Paima, we are focusing on this. And this is like something that for us is really fun because we get to interact with like core protocol, but at the same time we get to interact with dApps and more of like what's like adoption.
Thank you, Nico. Tom, back in 2015, ETH was only about a year old then. What drove you and your other co-founders to go the route of Trite and Tangle and do these novel approaches that nobody else took back then?
Well, I think, the way that I see the future is that blockchain is like the cloud, right? We have all of these different cloud infrastructure providers like AWS, like Google Cloud, like Azure and so on and so forth. And so ultimately, only a handful of layer ones are going to succeed in the future, right? Because right now we have a few thousand of them. So many of them will become roll-ups, they will become layer twos, and many of them will die, right? In order to become one of the successful layer ones, you really need to be different, right? You need to offer something new to the market to actually enable new use cases, go into new industries, and also have a very fundamentally different architecture. So obviously Cardano is one of those, and IOTA, one of the main reasons why we founded it is really because we believe that the blockchain architecture itself is inherently limited, right? When it comes to the fees, when it comes to the scalability, when it comes to the decentralization of it. And that's why we came up with the Tangle, which instead of having this single-threaded architecture is this multi-threaded architecture, right? So that you can actually process transactions in parallel. And so that was really the core founding principle of IOTA and why we went into this market. And so I would say technology is a differing factor for IOTA, but also sort of the vision, right? Because we didn't found IOTA to create a coin and pump it, so to say. We really founded IOTA because we believe in the future of blockchain, and we see it as our reason to exist is to realize the potential of blockchain, right? And that's why we did all of these industry use cases that went outside of crypto to really showcase the potential of blockchain. And that's why we're still here, right? And that's why we're still on this path to realize the potential of blockchain.
Yeah, it's very true. You've mentioned decentralization, and that segues perfectly into my next question to Sam, because you've witnessed the beginnings of Cardano, and when the initial specification was made and then the transition to Shelley. What was your view on the importance of decentralization?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you in the audience here were with us in 2020 when we started our journey into Shelley, and we started decentralizing block production. And this brought Cardano to the masses. It allowed a lot of people to participate. And at the same time, we were looking forward to where we're at now, decentralizing governance. We built things like the hard fork combinator, and we created an update system that allowed the blockchain to be updatable. And now, as we start decentralizing governance, people can actually start participating in the governance of the system, and they can start be making decisions on their own without a central entity governing those decisions.
I would love to use that as a next segue to Coordicide, which is something that Dom can tell us about later. But we heard about ecosystem, we heard about technology. One other very crucial part is finances. Nick, with them telling us about the beginnings of an ecosystem and how blockchains come to be, you have seen multiple bootstrap phases yourself. How do you manage the cost of these bootstrap phases and, more importantly, also manage the expectations of the ecosystem?
That's a good question, especially in bear market times, which makes that even more important and also even more difficult. One thing that I've seen, a big problem that I've seen across many ecosystems is lack of focus. And that's both on the entity level and also on the ecosystem collection of entities level. And what that results in is very inefficient use of their finances. And what the bear market does is that often creates a lot of fear, and every 3 months they would shift focus, do something else, do something else. And that's where I've seen a lot of inefficient use of finances, but also the bear market, other ecosystems have actually benefited from the bear market because it has forced them to be more focused. Because of because of things being a bit tighter, they've managed to actually come together and decide, okay, we actually need to do this rather than keep changing what we need to do every few months. One thing that I've seen a lot of is, and I think in almost all of the large ecosystems, is some shift in how grants are done. Previously, a couple of years ago, you'd see a lot of grants going out to a lot of different types of projects. Now I see grants schemes being way more focused on trying to get teams to build things that the founding entities know that will be more likely to succeed, and also focusing more on like the enterprise level, building partnerships so that you can get those big flagship products built on the blockchain without hemorrhaging loads of finances. The other thing that I've seen in the bear market is, one of the good things about the bear market is a lot of ecosystems have a lot more negotiating power than they think they have. Partners want to work with ecosystems, especially the large name ones, and a lot of other organizations just want capital, and that gives a lot of negotiation power for layer ones, even layer twos, and don't be afraid to use that to be able to maximize your finances. And I think that's where some ecosystems are very good at doing, and some other ones are unaware that they actually have this power in the bear market.
Thank you. Let's pick up on the decentralization topic for a moment, because I think, Dom, with IOTA 2.0 coming up, it's a big milestone, especially for decentralization in the IOTA ecosystem. Is that true?
Of course. I mean, it's one of the core premises, one of the core promises that we have made with IOTA, right? To completely decentralize the network, because our vision behind IOTA was always to have a leaderless consensus, right? Where we don't have a small subset of the network confirming the transactions like we have with the miners in Bitcoin, but we really empower everybody to confirm transactions, right? And so with that, really build a network where anybody is empowered to spin up their own node and to become a validator by staking their tokens, right? And so we are actually big fans of Cardano's delegated proof of stake, right? And so we also took some note of that and also based some of our research on it, because ultimately, you know, like all these blockchain networks, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you build a blockchain network with a handful of validators, because you can build more efficient systems than that today, right? And so this is why IOTA 2.0, which we are right now finalizing actually the whole stack, right? Because it includes the node software, but it also includes the wallet, the library, and all the integrations that need to be done in order to actually release that to the market. So right now we're finalizing the whole stack, and then we're actually launching a testnet, and then working on the rollout of that to the mainnet. First on the Shimmer network, which is our staging network, and then on IOTA.
Decentralization also often comes with a cost, though. Can somebody go into the game theory of security a bit? Why is it important, especially the more participants there are in a network? What kind of risks are there into the open round?
I can start off. So with Cardano, we funded tons of research on this very topic, on how we keep a secure blockchain with decentralization. And Ouroboros basically is our consensus protocol. And it's built actually upon having decentralization, that you need a lot of decentralization for the security of the protocol to work. But at the same time, you also need all those block producers to produce blocks to keep the security of the protocol. So when you decentralize, you have the risk that you're going to have some bad actors, that you're going to have actors that aren't paying attention, and basically your block production goes down, and that hurts the security of the network when that happens.
Nico, as a founder of a company that builds on the blockchain, or actually multiple blockchains, is that something you think about? Is that relevant?
Yeah, it's super important. And for example, one of the cases that it happened maybe not so long ago, give or take maybe a year and a half, it was with Axie Infinity, which currently maybe is the most popular Web3 game. And they got hacked. And you're like, how they got hacked? And basically what they had a sidechain that, if I remember correctly, maybe it was like 6 or 7 validators. So Unlike Cardano, that I think we are like around like 2,000 stake pool operators. There were only 7, and basically the majority, I think like 4 of them, they got hacked, and that compromised the network. I think it was one of the largest hacks that we have had in the industry. So this is one of like the reasons specifically for like the amount of validators that you should have. That makes a huge difference, because some specific attack vectors, they can happen when you have a small network, but they're very unlikely to happen when you need to like hack 2,000 validators with like different operating system, different setup in their network. It's a completely different like level. So decentralization is not just a topic for the sake of it. That's like some people have taken decentralization for something to avoid regulations, but decentralization also, for the technical perspective, is really important, because that gives you like such a good firewall against hacks.
I want to bring that or tie that security topic a little bit to the tokenomics and on-chain economics, which I think is a very interesting topic in itself, and we could probably spend hours just talking about this. But how would you say we can bridge on-chain economics, such as block subsidies, staking rewards, transaction fees, with off-chain real-world activities, such as paying developers or funding new companies?
I'll take this. Yeah, to cover that question, and also a little bit the last question as well, I think decentralization is also important for the longevity of these projects and chains. And for that to work, actually the tokenomics has to work as well. And it has to work independently of stabilizers and incentives that are somehow built into the tokenomics by the founding entities. Eventually, all these projects are going to have to stand on their own 2 feet, and if validators or node providers are being funded through these temporary measures, then to me this is semi-decentralized, and eventually these are the projects that have to somehow adapt so that they can stand on their own 2 feet, where people will be able to participate without there being, and will be willing to participate because the incentives are driven by good tokenomics, without there having to be these stabilizers and funding coming from other places. And in terms of linking the on-chain governance to what happens off-chain, I mean, a lot of the work being done on this is in the DAO world, and a lot of the work being done is on the tech side, but there's also a lot of work being done on the non-tech side, and how do you link legal obligations, paying people, things like that, to on-chain governance. And there's lots of different areas, I mean, and solutions to this at the moment. There's some structures that are forming where there are legal entities, often in offshore jurisdictions, which have written into their constitution how they interact with on-chain governance. That's one example, and there's a few other ways, but yeah, I think this is a challenge right now that people are trying to figure out. How do you actually, especially in a decentralized world, how do you continue to be able to fulfill these commitments, both legally and financially, and pay your taxes? Alex, I think your mic is off.
Hello, hello. Yes. I'm going to dare to ask a hot question. As Nick mentioned, it's a challenge to bridge these gaps. Dom, about 2 years ago, you tweeted that IOTA is the only token without inflation, and that you will never, or that IOTA will never increase its token supply. Yet, about a month ago, you announced a token increase. How is that?
Well, like when we founded IOTA, we did things very differently than everybody else in the market. So we had a different technology, we had a different organizational structure, right? Everybody else went to BVI, went to Switzerland, we set up a German foundation. We had a different focus, right? Working on real-world adoption instead of doing crypto adoption. And we also had different ideals, right? It was really about making IOTA a community project and giving 100% of the token supply to the community. Because back in those days, like in 2015 when we founded IOTA, you got so much shit for even just getting like a 5 or 10% token supply for the team, right? So the times when we founded IOTA to how the whole crypto market evolved, where it was quite frankly more commercialized, right? Where we went from taking no token supply, like Bitcoin did, to taking 100% of the token supply, just so that you can really artificially, play with the markets and also have a huge war chest to compete in the market. And I think for us, it was also realization where, like, even if we build the best tech in the market, right, that we will not be able to compete in such a market where the competitors have hundreds of millions of dollars in their war chest. And so it was about making a very difficult decision, breaking a promise in that regard, to make sure that IOTA actually has a future, right? And I think this is something that everybody needs to realize, like, unless you're willing to fundamentally change everything about your protocol, you are going to die, right? And so that also means breaking promises that you made in the past, because nobody knows what the future looks like, right? Like, this market is so unpredictable and so uncertain, where things are changing all the time. Nobody really knows what the actual use cases of blockchain are yet, right, that have mainstream potential. Sure, we had some fun with DeFi, we had some fun with tokenization, but nothing really sticks yet, right? And so there's still a lot more to do and a lot more to evolve. And we need to actually evolve these protocols on the foundational layer in order to make sure that we are ready to get the adoption, right? And so this is why we made this fundamental change to actually increase the token supply through a temporary token inflation that will last 4 years. And then after those 4 years, I can go back to sending out a tweet saying that there's not going to be any more token increase, right? Because we don't have a token inflation to incentivize the validators. But that's a separate point.
I could add to this. So with Cardano, we basically started with a fixed supply of 45 billion. And we set aside a little bit of reserves for basically getting things started, paying SPOs and everything. We also had this concept of a treasury introduced. So we could fund projects that you've seen funded through Project Catalyst. And with governance, we're basically allowing people to access these things and to be able to change things as they go. So I think the important thing when you're talking about supply and how things work is that the community needs to be involved in making those decisions. And the community is our biggest asset as a blockchain. It's the people out there, basically. So we need to listen to them and meet their needs.
Very true. Nika, know that you have a strong view on DeFi. As we've heard that as a blockchain application, and I think it fits to the current theme.
Yeah. I think actually Dom said something similar. I have nothing against DeFi, actually. I like DeFi. I think it has a place. But I think the last couple of years has seen way too many resources being funneled into just DeFi. And I think I see finance, in traditional finance is not a product in itself. It's a layer on top of other products that exist, right? Things that we need, schools, bridges, whatever. So, finance is there to help these other industries. And if the crypto industry is just finance, then I think it's doomed to fail. There has to be an underlying layer of utility and useful products for then DeFi to work and help those. So I think, and I think lots of investors are seeing this as well and are definitely trying to find these underlying products that are going to hit big and are going to have use cases. It could be commercial, it could be retail, it could be businesses, But there has to be this underlying layer, and I think that way more resources and brainpower needs to go into these areas rather than just this pursuit of DeFi. I also think that the DeFi party is over. All of these returns that people made, and I mean a lot of losses as well, it's kind of a zero-sum game. Even for investors, they're not going to see it as much as they did in previous years, so that's why they are pursuing other areas and other ways that they can see projects succeed, rather than just this speculative chase for whichever project can promise the highest yields at any one time. I think that's over.
We have about 8 minutes left, and before I'm going to open the round to the audience for a couple of questions. Very quick and concise to each of you. Since we have so many builders in this room, what are your top recommendations to someone building on a blockchain? Sam, start off.
So my top recommendation would be getting involved with the community. The community is your greatest asset. Get involved with others, share, open source as much as you can. Provide things that can help other people build, and utilize things that they provide for you. That would probably be my biggest suggestion. In addition to that, look at the tech you're building on. Look at how other people have built before you. Excuse me. Yeah, learn from your mistakes. Absolutely.
My mic sucked. Nick?
Yeah, so something that maybe is like, that I always have in mind when we are like building this Spark is that sometimes you're super excited to start this new idea. You're like, this is going to be like so good. I just want to like get it out. But my advice it would be move slower in the beginning so you can move faster later. What do this mean? That sometimes when you start this new project, you just grab stuff from here, there, and you're like optimizing for building fast. But let's put like the optimistic case, like things start working out for you. So these projects start like having users, taking off. But at that moment, realistically, you're not going to be able to go back and start like rebuilding stuff that maybe you for like I'm going to do later. So you need to be like very conscious to like actually some stuff in the very beginning, you need to do them properly because they're going to be the foundations for things that are going to come later. Obviously, you don't need to overdo it, that you're never going to chip, but it's like, for us, for like in terms of speed, in the mid-game of like a product lifetime, it has been very important what we did in the very start, which is like with the foundations. Because, for example, if you need to grab information from the blockchain, like, and you use something that's like a little bit hacky, or maybe it could work as a proof of concept, but you shouldn't mix a proof of concept with that MVP, minimum viable product that you want to present to users, because then it could be like really difficult to start changing stuff, because sometimes with the information structure and everything that's built on top, it's really difficult to change something because then you need to propagate all of those changes up in the chain. So that would be like my first advice. And the second one, security should be not something that you build a product and then, oh, I'm going to hire an auditor and they're going to tell me what's wrong, because maybe even going back to the first thing that I said, maybe some things from the foundation were like not so great and you have to redo so much stuff to be able to fix it. So something that, 3 things that we have done in terms of security is that we have been starting to work with auditors early in the lifetime of the development. Obviously, they're not going to audit everything because that's like super expensive and slow, but there are like critical pieces of infrastructure that could be like sensitive, that we ask them for advice, and this help us like confirm that some of our assumptions in terms of security are good. The second part of security is that auditing shouldn't be a check mark. You should actually try to like find the auditors that are going to try to find like mistakes on you. And so a lot of people have been going to like maybe like the cheapest auditing tools out there that maybe they even like have automatized a lot of stuff and they just look or like the most common bugs. It's helpful for sure, but it's not enough. So you should always be looking into that. And the third one, later on in the game, you should also be looking in formal verification, which is like a really good complement to what's like normal auditing with people. And this is something that actually I never thought that much until like Charles and IHK started talking like formal verification. I was like, okay, they're repeating this quite often. I better take a look at this. And like, it sort of opened my eyes. And for example, for Mil Comida, which is a sidechain for Cardano, we not only have like 3 audits from like top security companies, we also have a formal verification of like the Mil Comida. And I think we are like the only, yeah.
I think I have to cut you off. Looking at the time and being mindful.
Oh, sorry.
No, your inputs are super valuable, but we don't want to overdraw. Dom, what are your recommendations?
I think my point is like blockchain is not your business model, right? Because many people, like in blockchain, in this whole crypto space, it's too easy to fake it, right? Because you launch a token, it pumps for some reason, and suddenly you look like a genius, when at the core of it, you don't actually have a product that is actually making money, right? And we saw all of that crashing down in the last bear market, and there's going to be another bull market, and there's going to be another bear market, right? So what I'm trying to tell people is like actually build a sustainable business model behind what you're building, something that can make money, because that's the only way in which we'll succeed as an ecosystem, because otherwise we're just going to trade around tokens and hope that they go up in value, right? That's why we need to build a fundamental business model behind it.
And I very much second that, actually. But I think it's my place on this panel to give the boring answer, which is to tell the early founders of these projects is don't neglect the boring stuff. I see time and time again where I have to come into projects once they do make it and they do get bigger. A lot of the decisions they made early on the boring stuff being things like business structuring, finances, tax, regulation, jurisdiction planning. These are areas that often are neglected in the early days. You think, oh, I can figure that out later. And then often that results in a very costly way to fix those early mistakes. And sometimes impossibilities in fixing those, and actually can damage the business forever. So don't neglect the boring stuff in your early days.
Very true. We've got about 30 seconds left. If the timing gods allow a community question, we can. If they don't allow it, no. Timing gods say no. I want to say thank you very much. It was an honor and a pleasure. And I think your inputs are super valuable for everybody in here in this room. And give them a round of applause, please.